Gog and Magog in Judaism. In the tradition of Judaism, Gog and Magog are mentioned in the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 to 39, as part of a prophecy about the end times. Gog is the name of a national leader from the north, while Magog refers to the region or nation that Gog leads. This prophecy describes Gog and Magog as the great enemies of Israel who will attack the Holy Land in an eschatological war, known as the War of Gog of Magog. Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 2 instructs the prophet to speak to Gog in the land of Magog, the great leader Meshech and Tubal. Magog is often identified as the region around the Black Sea, with Meshech and Tubal referring to kingdoms in Anatolia or modern Turkey. In rabbinic literature, Gog and Magog symbolize a constant threat to Israel, both literal and symbolic. This prophecy is interpreted in various ways. Some classical Jewish scholars, such as Rashi, consider Gog and Magog as a metaphor for evil forces that go against God's plan. Meanwhile, modern interpretations place more emphasis on the symbolic nature of the conflict as a fight between righteousness and evil. In the Talmud, Gog and Magog are associated with messianic times. Other rabbinic texts, such as Midrash Tehillim, mention Gog and Magog as the final test for the nation of Israel before the coming era of peace and restoration under the Messiah. Judaism's tradition sees the Gog and Magog war as part of the divine design, in which God's intervention will bring victory to Israel and a demonstration of his greatness to all the nations of the world. The end of this conflict is seen as the beginning of the messianic golden age that the Jewish people have been waiting for. Christianity. In the Christian tradition, Gog and Magog appear in the New Testament, particularly in Revelation chapter 20, verses 7 to 10, which describes the eschatological events following Christ's millennial kingdom. In this context, Gog and Magog are not just individuals or regions, but a symbol for the nations around the world that will be led by Satan to fight against God and his people in the final war. Revelation chapter 20, verses 7 to 8 notes that after the 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released from prison and will come out to deceive the nations, referred to as Gog and Magog, to gather in battle against the saints. Their numbers are described as like the sand of the sea, indicating the great power they will bring. Theologically, Gog and Magog are here understood to represent the final forces of rebellion against God. This war, though great, ends in God's absolute victory, in which fire descends from heaven and destroys them, and Satan is cast into the lake of fire along with the beast and the false prophet. In early Christian theology, Gog and Magog were often associated with barbarian tribes that threatened the Roman Empire, such as the Huns or Scythians. Meanwhile, in modern interpretations, Gog and Magog are more often seen as symbols of the globalization of evil and human rebellion against God in the last days. Some Christian traditions, especially those that subscribe to premillennialism, associate Gog and Magog with modern geopolitical events, often identifying them with specific nations that are considered to be potentially against Israel. However, this view is speculative and not universally accepted in Christianity. The main emphasis remains on the message of divine victory over evil. Islam. In Islam, Gog and Magog are known as Ya'juj and Ma'juj. They are mentioned in the Quran in Surah Al-Kahf verses 93 to 98 and Al-Anbiya verses 96 to 97. Ya'juj and Ma'juj are destructive nations that will appear at the end of time as one of the great signs of the end of the world. In Surah Al-Kahf, the story of Zulkarnain tells how a strong king built a great wall to hold back Ya'juj and Ma'juj. These people are described as destroyers who constantly wreak havoc and invade other regions. The wall was made of iron and copper to contain them, but at the end of time, this wall will be destroyed, and Ya'juj and Ma'juj will come out, causing great destruction on earth. Al-Anbiya mentions that when this wall is destroyed, Ya'juj and Ma'juj will come from every high place, flooding the world. They are described as numerous and destructive, consuming resources and attacking humanity. In the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, Ya'juj and Ma'juj are mentioned as part of the great test at the end of time. In one hadith narrated by Imam Muslim, Ya'juj and Ma'juj will attack humanity, but are eventually destroyed by Allah through a disease that wipes them out. Views in Islam often associate Ya'juj and Ma'juj with nations that will bring great tribulation before the coming of the day of judgment. Historical and modern interpretations differ, with some scholars regarding them as symbols of the rise of global evil, while others try to identify them with specific groups or regions of the world. However, the main message remains that they are a sign of Allah's power and part of the destiny of the end times. Zoroastrianism. Although Gog and Magog are not explicitly mentioned in the texts of Zoroastrianism, the concept of destructive forces destroying the world can be found in the doctrines of this religion. In Zoroastrianism, the eschatological teachings revolve around the cosmic conflict between the forces of light, Ahura Mazda, and darkness, Angra Mainyu, culminating in the final battle of the world. In the Avesta, especially the section known as Frashokareti, or End Times, it is depicted that the forces of evil will be unleashed to test humanity. As part of this scenario, the emergence of destructive groups that bring destruction is similar to the role of Gog and Magog in other traditions. They can be understood as symbols of the forces of chaos fighting against the order championed by Ahura Mazda. The Zoroastrian tradition also speaks of attacks from destructive nations such as the Turanians, who were historically considered enemies of ancient Iran. These nations, although not referred to as Gog and Magog, have a similar role in Zoroastrian mythology as threats that must be overcome before the world achieves final peace. Ultimately, in Zoroastrian eschatology, Ahura Mazda's victory will erase all evil, including destructive forces such as Gog and Magog by analogy. Frashokareti brings the world into perfection, and humanity will unite in harmony after the destruction of the forces of evil. Thus, although Gog and Magog are not directly present in the Zoroastrianism tradition, the concept's parallels to end-time forces of destruction provide a similar eschatological framework to Abrahamic religions. Bahai faith. In the Bahai faith, Gog and Magog are understood symbolically as destructive forces or conflicts that arise before the arrival of the New World Order. The Bahai tradition, which is a religion that grew out of the roots of Shia Islam, often interprets eschatological elements in Scripture with a metaphorical rather than literal approach. Bahai scriptures, such as those written by Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha, refer to the concept of Gog and Magog as part of the great struggle between truth and error. Gog and Magog symbolize two elements, spiritual corruption and materialism, that dominated the world before the advent of universal peace. The concept of Gog and Magog is closely linked to the period of transition of the world towards the unity of humanity, which is at the core of the Bahai teachings. In this context, Gog and Magog can be seen as symbols of the political divisions, wars, and social tensions that precede the New Age. Baha'is believe that through these challenges, the world will learn to overcome conflict and move towards global peace. Baha'is also use a symbolic approach to interpret stories in the Quran and Bible, including Gog and Magog, as warning signs to improve oneself and society. The Baha'i perspective emphasizes that these eschatological struggles are part of God's plan to bring humanity to spiritual perfection. As such, Gog and Magog in the Baha'i tradition are not regarded as specific physical entities, but rather as embodiments of the great challenge that humanity must overcome in order to achieve the vision of worldwide unity and harmony as taught in this faith. Manichaeism. In Manichaeism, the dualistic religion taught by Mani in the 3rd century AD, Gog and Magog are not directly mentioned. However, the concept of eschatology in Manichaeism has similarities to the role of Gog and Magog in other religions, especially as symbols of destructive forces and the cosmic conflict between light and darkness. Manichaeism teaches about the eternal struggle between the kingdom of light and the kingdom of darkness. In this teaching, the end times will be characterized by a great conflict in which the dark forces seek to destroy the world that has been mixed with light. This conflict mirrors the symbolism of Gog and Magog in the Abrahamic tradition as forces of destruction that precede the victory of righteousness. In the final stage, Manichaeism depicts that the light dispersed in matter will be separated and returned to its original source in the kingdom of light. This event is accompanied by the total destruction of the dark elements, a vision similar to the destruction of Gog and Magog in Jewish, Christian, and Islamic eschatological texts. Although Gog and Magog are not explicitly mentioned, the symbolism of destructive forces in Manichaeism is often identified with forces of darkness or demons trying to defeat the light. In this tradition, the final conflict is not about a particular nation or region, but about the cosmic purification of evil elements. Thus, although Gog and Magog are not present in Manichaeism in terms, the similar idea of a destructive force at the end of time provides a relevant context when compared to other religious traditions. It reinforces the universal theme of the struggle of good against evil found in many of the world's faiths. Hinduism. In the Hindu tradition, Gog and Magog are not explicitly mentioned, but their concept can be found thematically in end-time imagery, particularly in the Kali Yuga, which is the final era in the Hindu cosmic cycle. The Kali Yuga symbolizes a time of destruction, moral chaos, and spiritual degradation that ends with restoration by the incarnation of the god Vishnu as Kalki. In this context, Gog and Magog can be seen as an analogy for the destructive forces that dominate the Kali Yuga. In this period, Hindu scriptures such as the Bhagavata Purana and Vishnu Purana depict a world destroyed by social chaos, war, gluttony, and hatred. Much like Gog and Magog in the Abrahamic tradition, these destructive forces reflect the great test before cosmic restoration. One concept that comes close to Gog and Magog in Hinduism is Asura, or the evil forces that constantly fight against Deva, gods. Asura is often depicted as the destroyer of worlds and the bringer of destruction before a new order is created. In end-time stories, Kalki will descend to Earth to destroy these evil forces, establishing a new world of harmony. Another parallel is the myth of the Great War in the Mahabharata, Kurukshetra, which describes the fight between Dharma, righteousness, and Adharma, unrighteousness, which can be likened to the battle against Gog and Magog in a symbolic context. Although Gog and Magog are not directly mentioned in Hinduism, the universal theme of destructive forces threatening the balance of the world prior to cosmic renewal remains relevant, suggesting thematic connections to their concepts in other religions. Buddhism. In the Buddhist tradition, Gog and Magog can be interpreted regarding destructive forces and destruction that arise before the restoration of the world can be found in the teachings about Maitreya, the future Buddha. Maitreya is believed to come into the world when society has reached a severe level of moral and spiritual decay. In Buddhist texts, such as the Kakavati Sayhanada Sutta, it is described that the world will enter a period of chaos before Maitreya appears. During this time, conflict, violence, and suffering will reach their peak, similar to the image of Gog and Magog in the Abrahamic tradition as destructive forces that appear at the end of time. One other parallel is the concept of Mara, a demonic figure in Buddhism who tried to tempt Siddhartha Gautama before becoming the Buddha. Although Mara is an individual entity, he is often symbolized as a collective force that causes chaos and spiritual obstacles similar to the symbolic role of Gog and Magog as forces of destruction. In the apocalyptic Buddhist tradition, there are stories of the emergence of destructive kings or armies that destroy the world before a new cycle begins. These armies, although not called Gog and Magog, reflect the role of destructive forces that destroy before the moral and spiritual renewal brought by Maitreya. Buddhism also emphasizes that this cycle of destruction and renewal is part of samsara, the cycle of birth and death. Gog and Magog, if understood symbolically, can be seen as forces in samsara that test humanity's spiritual endurance before achieving enlightenment and harmony. As such, although Gog and Magog are not directly present in Buddhism, their themes as symbols of chaos and conflict have relevant parallels in Buddhist eschatology and mythology. Taoism. In Taoism, Gog and Magog is about the concept of destructive forces or cosmic threats that shake the balance of the world can be found in Taoist teachings of universal harmony and cycles of change. Taoism views the world as a field of balance between yin, passive force, and yang, active force, where conflict and destruction are considered part of the dynamics of the universe. In Taoist mythology, there are stories of great threats that disrupt the harmony of the world, such as giant creatures or armies attacking the human world. For example, the legend about Qiyu, a god of war who causes great chaos, mirrors the role of destructive forces, such as Gog and Magog in other traditions. Taoism also has a concept of the cycles of time and change, where periods of imbalance or destruction are regarded as stages before the restoration of balance. In this context, Gog and Magog can be understood as symbols of this phase of imbalance where chaos peaks before harmony is restored. In addition, Taoist texts such as the Tao Te Ching speak of the forces of destruction as part of Wu Wei in action in the face of natural cycles. Destructive events caused by destructive forces such as Gog and Magog are considered a natural part of the transformation of the cosmos towards a new balance. Although Gog and Magog are not explicitly present in Taoism, these destructive and restorative themes show similarities with their roles in other religions. Taoism places more emphasis on understanding and accepting the natural process of destruction and renewal, which is an integral part of the universal journey towards harmony.